Hi, I'm Sharon Ross with the Capital City Arts Initiative here at Western Nevada College's Bristlecone Gallery, introducing the exhibition Fables and Myths with Sue Cotter and Elaine Parks. For the video for this exhibition, we have commissioned Stephen Reed to interview the artists, and this is part of our Nevada Neighbors series, now an online series. So we hope you enjoy the video.
All right, so hi Elaine.
Hi, Stefan.
Congrats on the show. It looks fantastic. I'm kind of curious, you've been making art for 25 years, over 25 years out of college, and I'm just kind of curious how you feel, I think, about being an artist like right now and having all of that time that you have spent making art. Do you feel how do you feel, right, where you're at, I guess, in your career?
Well, I feel really happy to be in Reno. Our community is really welcoming. It's small, so we're all one. So we all go support each other and go to each other's shows. And I get a lot of opportunities to show here. I guess the next thing I'm thinking is I'm applying for residencies elsewhere because I'm very safe and comfortable here, but I feel like I have to do more. I still always feel like I have to keep pushing, trying to make it better.
Right.
Yeah.
Have you, in that 25-year period, when I looked at your CV, you seem to be consistent, always making work, always showing work. Were there times where you wanted to punch out, or have you kind of felt pretty safe in the space that you've been in and making work and comfortable?
Not necessarily comfortable, but I didn't feel comfortable not participating. I do feel like it's important to keep. I feel like a residency would give me an opportunity to step back because some are not geared for production so much as just the experience.
Correct.
So I think it would be a different experience to be making work not for a show. I'm fortunate in being able to get lots of shows, so I'm often making work for something. And there's a pressure, and I'd like to try it without that pressure.
Do you feel that so a residency sometimes gives you the latitude to diverge from things that you've done in the past, right? Experiment a little bit with things. Do you feel kind of like you're on a certain path that you need to kind of keep making the same work, or is there something within the process that allows you that experimentation to kind of make new work as you're rolling through?
If I have a show, I feel safer going with what I know.
Right.
So I do, there are some things I would like to explore, some different materials, maybe combined with ceramics. Actually, what's going on around Reno, there's a lot of fiber art and ceramics. People are combining those, and I'm very interested in that. But I can't have a deadline because I need to be able to fail.
Right. Okay, so I noticed on your CV that there was a period of time between undergrad and grad school.
Long period of time.
It caught me by surprise a bit.
Yeah.
And I went to grad school relatively close after undergrad, but I was 35 and I don't think I got my MFA till I was in my 40s, so I was late. So that time span was interesting to me. Why did that happen?
Well, I was making art. It happened kind of a lot like the way I moved to Tuscarora, sort of. It's a little more than a whim, but a friend of mine was getting his MFA at Cal State Los Angeles, and he asked me to help him on his grad project. And so I did, and he said, well, Elaine, why don't you apply? You should get your MFA. What was that? And it was great for me. It was one of the best times of my life. So the timing was right. I was mature enough to know that I could spend this much time making art. Even though I'd been making art, I don't know, just to
right. But so
go
you
to
were,
school for it.
Right, so you were consistently, so you were kind of making between that period of
I
undergraduate,
was.
right?
I had a little studio and I was showing.
This was in LA?
This was in LA.
Right.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
Oh, that's awesome. So you just, that's a good segue. So at the end of your tenure in grad school, you kind of moved out to Tuscarora.
I moved to Tuscarora.
Right? And that, which is fascinating, right? But I'm kind of curious because that's a whole, you know, there's a lot of history there. There's a lot going on with that pottery school, and I'm just kind of curious how that affected your craft, your process, how you worked, what you were making, you know, what impact did it have on all of that?
When I first went to Tuscarora, I was already very familiar with high desert landscapes. I grew up going to like the desert around Apple Valley and also the desert in Central Oregon. Kind of similar elevation and similar landscape to Tuscarora.
Correct.
So the landscape didn't shock me, and for years I'd been trying to leave LA, and for a long time it was very cheap to live there, so it was hard to leave. And I think I just, you know, made a decision. I'm going to get out of here and make a big change. As big a change as I possibly can.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and you lived out there?
I lived out there full-time for 7 years, and then my parents were having issues, so then I went back and forth for a couple years, and then I moved back down to LA for a while.
So did you find that kind of refreshing? I know some folks, you know, I was just out in Baker, Nevada, and was talking to somebody out there, and that type of isolation, right, really helped her with her focus and her mental capacity, right? It was almost forced upon her to make that happen.
Right.
And I don't know how, you know,
yeah,
was that helpful or?
It was helpful. I had a similar experience. I mean, you have to make your own everything out there, your own fun, your own to-do list. So, I mean, what a perfect thing for artists, which is why there are artists that live there, I think. You know, there's lots of time and space and all that sky. I don't know, your mind just can wander and you can get a lot from the landscape. And those night skies, I mean, it's stunning. And it's not always beautiful, like crickets, for example. Like sometimes it can be horrifying, but it's.
Is that what's horrifying about Tuscarora? Is the crickets? The Mormon crickets.
The Mormon crickets.
The Mormon crickets
are horrifying.
Yes, they're horrifying. Yeah, I don't think I was going to put those two together, but that's so funny.
But there's an intensity about that remoteness, and with no people, you sort of see the land you're on, and that's very interesting to me.
So there's a strong presence of nature in your work, whether through materials, textures, and form. How do your surroundings influence what you create? And how intentional is your connection to place in the work?
I very much respond to place. Walking around in Tuscarora, I do feel a sense that the vastness reminds me of being under the water, which at one time it was. And you know, people talk about the sagebrush sea, and there are all those tailing piles out there. We all call them whales, and one's called Moby Dick. So people, I feel, naturally reference an ocean in the desert. I think just because of the vastness. But there's, I don't know, something you can feel it used to be underwater.
Right.
Because most of the response I get to my work is that it's like marine, that it's coming from the ocean. However, my inspiration is very much the desert. But I don't feel like those things are all that far apart. And I spent some little time out in Pyramid Lake, of course, and these groups of pieces, those two faux rocks out there, they look like people. they looked like they could stand up and move around. So I was trying to make something that looked like a rock, but also looked like it could get up and move and be animated, like almost a character, but I was hoping to stop short of it being cute, you know.
So obviously the desert and the ocean kind of aspect of how these relate, because I definitely see, right, we mentioned Grimes Point, Mono Lake, right, with the tufas, right, fantastic, but those are all dry types of things. But you glaze your work more in the fashion of something maybe sea, or at least from like
these
we're
right
standing
here,
in front of these, right?
These right
feel
here,
more
sure.
ocean, right? Which kind of tends
greens,
to lend the greens and stuff versus land-based structures. Do you do that on purpose?
The forms, I definitely have an intention about it. Glazing is a little more mysterious, even after decades of it.
Right.
And it always comes out a little differently.
Right.
I think I use the same 6 glazes, and even though I'm firing in an electric kiln, which is very consistent, I still get a big variation, and I'm often surprised.
So you're more intentional. So that's interesting. I think you're more intentional in your forms, right? And glazing is an art, like you said. You've been doing it for so long, but you can 100 different times you get 100 different kind of looks.
Kind of,
right?
yeah.
You're okay with that process because of the nuances that you're to let those go.
Well, ceramics, you just have to accept that.
Right.
Ceramics keeps you humble.
Right.
You don't ever quite know, and things can crack and
Right.
So I do like that about ceramics,
Right.
because it's like, if it's great, it's like, oh, it's Christmas. But you better not 100% count on something, because you can't.
Did you learn that early on in your career, right? Because of
Yeah.
with ceramics, right? Because it can be a bit all over the place.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, I did. It's just, you live with that if you
Right.
do clay.
So, and I think these pieces right here, there is these. I don't know if you have a name for what is coming off of this. They're very suckery, like an octopus type of tentacle. But is this something that you add after? Or is this during the process?
I add it when this part is still wet. I'll make these. They're on a wire that you can fire at a high temperature. So I'll make these and fire them so they're tough. And then when this is done, but still wet, I
Right.
poke them in.
Right. So I think there was what's interesting, because there's a level of abstraction with this work, right? And I'm always curious about abstraction with starting and ending, right? Do you have something in your head when you start, right? When you walk up and you start your clay, do you have an idea? And then how do you know when that is finished?
Well, the way I start, I'll usually think of how a thing will go together, and I'll just try and stick with that. Like, either if it's a surface treatment like these, or if it's an actual construction, like some of the ones we were around earlier. But I'll think of a process, how the process builds a thing, and that's how I'll build it and see where that takes me. So there's I have a general idea, but I know what process I want to use. The form sometimes takes me where I don't expect. What was the second part?
What was the second part? When do you know
Oh,
if
when
there's...
it's done.
Yeah. When do you know when it's done?
When it looks right.
So it's right.
You
It's an
just
aesthetic,
keep
right?
going until
right.
it seems finished.
Right.
Yeah.
That's I mean, I'm
Yeah.
with you. It's a hard kind of thing. I love the way that this is hung above these, or this, right? Because there's this kind of hierarchical thing going on. I didn't even look at the title of the damn thing. Spirits.
But this has had a different title in the past. I have I don't know, 15 groups of these. And they were hung horizontal at one point, and then it was called school. So then it was a marine thing. So I'm interested in, I make sculpture so you can hang it several ways,
Right.
because it changes the
Absolutely.
whole thing, which I find very interesting about sculpture.
Right.
Just like a different orientation gives it a different meaning.
So how important is because some people, when the artwork is out in the world, it's out in the world.
Right.
Right? The
Right.
people are going to bring their baggage and whatever they have in their life.
Which is great. I love that.
So you're,
Yeah.
right? You're
Yeah.
good with that.
Yeah, I'm totally good with that.
Right.
I'd rather them bring, engage with the work and think of something that relates to them.
Correct.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Yeah. So I do love that.
So these couple of pieces here, I was just looking at the title, right? Because you reference planets, which seem otherworldly compared to what we've kind of been looking at up to this point. Can you talk about these maybe a little bit?
Sure. Well, I'm never far away from that night sky that we have such an amazing view of. So I always am thinking about that. But that said, I did see Rachel Stiff's show and saw her talk a month or two back, and
Right.
I think I was thinking of her when I
Right.
made these.
Well, what's wonderful about these is, right, this kind of figure ground thing that's kind of going on. The contrast between the very smooth surface and the kind of tentacles coming off of these, those are really quite kind of lovely.
Well, and I think that one particularly could be a sea thing. We could put that back under the water.
This could live, that's right, this could go back. But they are, and I think something that I should talk about and that I haven't is the level of craft, I think, that you put into these. You never kind of get caught on any craft issues, right? I can take the work in for what it is, and it's really, and I'm sure that's a testament of time that you have put into your work.
It is the time. It is the time.
Right.
And how you know it's done, that's another way I know it's done, is if I don't really see my hand so much
Right.
in it.
Right.
Yeah.
This is kind of timeless to me, right? There's these things about the abstraction and the similarity of the things that I might know in nature, but yet the idea of time seems to dissipate with this kind of work for me. And I don't know if you think about time at all either. Like I said, not in how long it takes you to make something, but it's maybe relevance.
Well, I think it goes back to the idea of when I'm walking out in the desert, and that I can really imagine that desert underwater. So time does kind of collapse. And even a more recent kind of time collapsing, like Tuscarora was an old mining town, and we always find little bits of left from when it was a bigger town. And it's sort of like the past is coming alive to us all the time there. I think that's part of what happens because there are so few people that all these other things come into play. I'm sure that's going on everywhere, but you can notice it when
Right.
there's more of a empty space. So I think that does, I don't know how to say it about
Right.
how it directly feeds into my work exactly, but I do think
Right.
about it. So that's interesting you picked that up.
Yeah, it is something that when I was looking, right, when I think about time, and maybe it's because, you know, as you guys have discussed, we're on the other side of the parabola a bit, right? And time is feeling compressed. But when I engage in this work, I don't think about it so much, right? It seems timeless to me, this work. The organic nature, like you say, millions and millions of years ago, these types of shapes were being kind of created out in the desert, and it just seemed like they could go on forever. Are those separate as well?
Those are separate.
Are they?
Yeah.
Those are fantastic.
I didn't like it without them, and so I made.
Did you? So after that was fired, you came in?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah.
So that's kind of interesting.
Yeah, it wasn't done.
Well, look, so I'm just trying to pick out. So, did you have the glaze on these pieces before these went on, or was that part of the process of adding these here at the end?
I made these, glazed these, and they're actually glued.
They're glued.
On.
Are they really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
So I get a sense of frustration with this piece that you don't like it so much. Do you like this? Or is it?
It feels a little like a Frankenstein piece to me, because I didn't like it. It's growing on me.
Right. God, it's one of my favorite pieces.
All right.
Yeah. So
well, that's good. That's good to hear.
No, it's very cool. So in the near future, what are your plans, or what do you think that you want to do here in the next year or so?
Well, I have another show in the small Brewery Arts Council space in the Old Arts Council.
The Old Arts Council office, correct?
And
That's
I'm
cool.
doing a talk at the museum in late July.
Oh, fantastic!
Yeah, and
related to the Ichthyosaur show.
Related to the Ichthyosaur show. And I'm waiting to hear back from residency applications. So hopefully I'll be going somewhere.
That's correct. Oh, that would be fantastic. Yeah. Well, congratulations. Thank you for talking to me. Yeah, I appreciate it.
Hello, Stephanie.
Nice to meet you. Congrats on the show. It's fantastic. I thought I'd start with just asking you a couple of questions, maybe at the beginning of your career, or maybe how kind of growing up and moving around influenced your stuff. So you've lived in a lot of places early in your life, and you moved around. And how did that sense of movement and maybe not having a home base or a hometown influence your understanding of place and identity, maybe both personally and in your artwork?
Well, I always felt this sort of lack of connection to a place, and interviewed people who had a connection, who grew up in the same place with the same friends, going to school year after year with the same people, or being close to family members and having all these cousins and aunts and uncles around. And my family, we went from one side of the country to the other, and then back again, and then down south, and several different locations. And not having that rootedness, I think, well, one thing I mentioned, and it's in the essay, I think it led to my love of books and reading, because that was where I kind of found my place in stories. And my love of stories was a place to connect and immerse myself and identify with the characters and have that family in the book that I didn't have in the world. Always being uprooted and leaving friends. You have a group of friends in one place, and all of a sudden, okay, bye, and nobody writes, and when you're kids, you just don't stay connected. So at one point I did decide to adopt my father's hometown as my hometown.
Which was?
Corning, Iowa.
Corning, Iowa.
Yeah, because there's a lot of family history there, and there were a lot of cousins there. But gradually the cousins all left, and then my grandmother died, and my aunt died. So pretty soon there's nothing. So I'm creating my own world. I think that's part of it. It's just my work. I'm just always looking to create my own world.
So what was interesting in that kind of description there is that you said you envied And I'm just wondering, because envy is a strong feeling, right? And I'm just wondering if there's a baseline of envy when you're creating your work, right? Is that a feeling that you still?
No, not that much anymore.
Not that much anymore. Do you see it now maybe as something that was, maybe as a young person you saw it as envy, but now as a strength as you've gotten older?
Yeah, I just see it as something that shaped my direction in life.
Right.
But, with age comes wisdom, and I just feel less and less concerned about that anymore. It's just as family members are gone and friends now, I'm at that age where I'm losing friends, and I'm on the downhill side of life, age-wise. You just let go of a lot, and now I just, all I want to do is my work. I want to just do my art, follow my impulses, and I think that's one reason it may seem disjointed. I know the threads between all my work, but I've learned over time to trust my little impulses. That might seem silly, but I think when you're in the studio, you should be allowed to just be silly. Do something dumb. Just do what pops into your head. These creative ideas that just pop into my head, and I think, well, that's a little weird, but I want to do that. I want to make that thing, because it just
right. And
feels right.
And the title of this is Tuscarora
Thel.
Right. And can you maybe talk about how this came to be?
Sure. For one thing, I had the rusty birdcage stand that a neighbor gave me, and it was in my studio for many years. I knew I wanted to do something very special with it, and I pretty much knew I wanted to use the Thel figure. I've been making Thel figures for several years. But I didn't have the means to do the kind of figure I wanted to do. And this was maybe 3 years ago. I saw online Tuscarora Pottery School had this workshop to do dolls with collage and doll figures, combined with assemblage. I thought, oh, perfect. So I went to Tuscarora, met Elaine the first time, and was able to make this figure out of clay, which I don't think I could have done it any other way. And brought this cage with me, and some of these things I collected, the old wood and the chain, all came from Tuscarora. I made the masks there, all there.
And can you explain, because I had to do a little research because I wasn't up on Thel, and maybe the background of, and because it's a recurring theme in this exhibit.
Thel comes from William Blake's poem, The Book of Thel. And I latched on to the Thel idea so long ago, I barely remember why or what I was thinking. I recently went back and reread the poem and thought, I'm not sure I think I took that sort of ethereal figure and turned her into my own thing. Because the poem anymore. But she became my own thing. And over the years, I've done several different iterations of Thel with different materials and kind of different storylines. But in the same way, it's a similar storyline. The storyline continues. Thel with the masks. Thel can be whoever she wants to. She can put on the masks. This one. And maybe we'll talk about some of the other Thels that are in the show.
So I'm curious about the process, right? Your process. And because your work clearly blurs the lines, I think, that we talked about of sculpture and storytelling. So when you approach a new piece, like the birdcage assemblage here, what comes first? Is it the narrative, or is it the object, right? Is there something?
I would say the object, in this case, the object was discovered in a wonderful thrift store in Boulder, Colorado. And right away, I just saw what I wanted to do with it. It was like, oh, Thel in the birdcage. As I thought about it a little more, the title came to me. Leave me alone, I'm reading. And it's probably the closest to representing me. Because leave me alone, I'm reading. I feel that way a lot. It's like, go away world, I just want to read my books. And so I just started working on how to fit her in. I made all these little miniature books to go in there. Some of the miniatures I purchased from a miniature supply. But the figure itself is made out of muslin that is stuffed and painted with acrylic to stiffen it. And there is a wire armature so I could pose the arms. The head is polymer clay. And Thel herself is a mourning dove. So I'm trying to sculpt the head, you know, the shape, the proper shape of a mourning dove. But I just left it gray, like all over gray rather than trying to paint in details.
And so when this assemblage is coming together, you mentioned that you made some of these.
Yeah, little books.
These little books which are incredible. Is there something when you're doing this or putting the assemblage together in the process that says I'm going to need to add something, or I can purchase this? You know, how does that kind of process, or is it unique to the piece that you're doing?
I get her in there first, and then I start looking. And I know, in my mind, I can see, I just want piles and piles of books. I mean, this is my own library. This is what it looks like. You know, I've got piles of books on the floor and everywhere. So I just wanted lots of piles of little books. And of course, you can't just buy all the different shapes and sizes and colors of little books. So what I did was just take old books and cut them, cut the covers off, and then rebind them.
Right.
So they're not real books. I mean, if you open it up, you can just see the text cut out from a book, an existing book.
Right.
And then when I felt like other little things needed to be in there, I actually had the newspaper. I stuck that in. I had the little coffee cup, and I made the little stand. And then, you know, just start looking and seeing, okay, you need something here, and I need something there. Where can I fit more books? And the basket had to be there because that's me in real life too. I have baskets on the floor with books, you know, spilling out. So
there's some aesthetic, choices being made, right? In composition,
Yeah.
right? Things have to.
And I also wanted to point out, these are the annoyances. They can't get in. She's in the cage, but the annoyances can't get in there, and they jiggle. And the annoyances are modeled after that famous Goya etching of the nightmare.
Right.
These little monsters that are flying around his head. That's what I used.
Maybe if we could just dive into Thel just a little bit more, because I'm kind of curious. Because you've referenced yourself, right, with Thel, right, and and Thel is an avian, right, a bird, right, it's earthly, it's all right, and it can fly. It can fly, right, look down. So do you? How do you represent yourself? I think, or is this representing yourself? Are you constantly thinking of is it autobiographical when you're kind of making these pieces?
Not constantly, but it's there. It's there.
Right.
It's not in every piece, but she's always kind of been. It really started a long time ago when someone asked me if I could be an animal, what would I be? You know, and of course I would be a bird. I'd always loved birds. And then this person said, "Well, what kind of bird?" I think it was about 15 years old when this happened, and I said, "A mourning dove," because I lived in Vegas, and mourning doves were always outside my bedroom window in the morning, and I could hear them, and they would nest in the trees, and I just thought they were just sweet, peaceful, pretty little birds, but also identified with them because they're timid, and that's how I always feel, shy and timid. So I relate to that bird, to Thel in that way. But that's why I also started making her masks, because in the real world I have to put on masks sometimes to be something other than what I really feel comfortable being.
Right. And so is this keeping people out, or
Yes.
right?
Yes.
This kind of feeling here.
Leave
right?
me alone.
Leave me. Yes, right. That's interesting. I took a picture of that and put it in Google Translate to see what was being said, right? And you know, it's a military scene, which was interesting.
Military scene.
Yeah. It was. Where'd you get the book? Did you have you read that?
Oh, this book.
This right here.
Oh, see, I don't even care.
I know.
Yeah.
Well, it's interesting. I know it's interesting. Right to Google
That is
Translate and go,
interesting.
what what's going
Yeah,
on?
it has no, it's just an old book, you know, in a different language.
So maybe you can explain, because this evolved out of the two stones.
Yes.
There's a name for that in tradition. Maybe you can explain
Well,
that.
that's really what Chris was writing about is my spirit stone.
Spirit stones. That's
book.
those over
Yeah,
there.
yeah, that one. But it does tie in because I've always, again, I can tell you the origin story.
Yeah, that
I
would be
still
great.
lived in Reno. I had just graduated. I was down the Truckee River and I was having a very emotional, difficult time. And I found this rock. I was learning letterpress at that point, so I was starting to do the books, and I studied with Bob Blessy at Black Rock Press. I picked up this rock, and it just split open. And of course, I have books on my brain, so I'm thinking book covers. But it also was really profound to me because I thought about how many eons did it take for that rock to form and be laying there, and for me to pick it up and be the one who opened it up. So I thought that was really spiritually significant to me at the time.
Right.
That was the first one. So after that, I just started paying attention to rocks that might have cracks and that I could open up. And over the years, I've collected, and friends give some to me sometimes. So that started the whole, I call them rock books. And for most of them, I make, the paper is handmade, and I make the paper in the shape of the rock. So I make a template, I trace the rock shape, I make a template, and I cast up the pages, the paper, in the shape of the rock. So they're all custom-made papers. And each rock is different. The rock speaks to me depending on its shape, what it wants to be. And,
So that's what kind of, so it's shape of the rock, maybe size of the rock, all of that dictates
Yeah.
how you want
look
to.
at where it came from.
Right,
You know, it sort of tells me what the theme should be.
right.
Bricolage du jour 2, because I did a number 1 a long time ago, was a case where I had made all the paper and I'd actually put the book together, but I didn't have any content. And I just thought, sometimes you get to this point where you just don't have any good ideas, but it's just to sit down and make one collage every day, just a little collage every day for a few minutes, and that's what I did, just to sort of get back into some kind of flow. So that's why it's bricolage du jour, because it's a little collage every day until I fill all the pages. So the backing papers are just like, I collect old books I get from thrift stores and library sales. I just collect old books and tear them up and use the papers, use the covers, use bits and pieces in my collage.
So the themes, though, I mean, pretty specific themes with each one, right? And how that evolves from a stone, right? That kind of creative process is kind of interesting to me, like with the flames here.
Yeah. Yeah, this one was, well, to find it, I'm going to go ahead and close it. To find a 3-layered rock like that, that's split, was unique. So I thought, okay, this has to be really special. So right away I thought, pop-up. First page has to be a pop-up. And I don't know why I thought of doing flames. I can't remember now. It's that thing I was just saying about. Things just pop into my head, and then even if it's kind of silly, I go with it. So I did the flames, and I liked the way they came out. And then I started thinking, okay, I have to relate the flames to the book pages. So I had already made all these pages, and I thought I'll burn one page so there's kind of this see-through thing, and then do a collage on the other side. And so I sat in my studio with my little burning tool and burned all these little holes in the pages. And then, again, it was like a collage a day until I filled it.
Now, I'm kind of curious, like, when do you think, I don't know if there's a narrative within this book, or is there a point till you get to say, okay, that's thick enough, I'm going to stop, right? This beginning, I'm always curious in kind of the beginning and the ending and how that stops.
Yeah,
or when you say,
sometimes I do, but here, this is called Sparks and Embers. And I just said some ideas come quick as hot sparks and others smolder like embers and take a while to develop.
So
And
you have your writing in here as well.
Yeah.
You've got,
But that's just, everything else is visual.
all right.
I used to write, when I first learned letterpress and started making books, I used my own text and I used to write poetry.
Right.
And at some point, that whole impulse to write poetry just evaporated out of my head. So now I go visual, and I don't know why I don't write poetry anymore. But,
Well, it's more of a visual narrative now.
yeah,
than it is a literary,
I think I
right?
felt more comfortable with the visual than I did with the writing.
Right.
So,
So, I mean, I think that's, and we talked a little bit earlier, and I skipped over that you started off as a painter,
yes,
right?
yes.
And that's what you were going to school for at UNLV, was painting?
Yeah, that was supposed to be my focus.
And what was the impetus, or was there something,
I think because I always I love stories, and I'm still in my soul a storyteller. And so in my painting, I still wanted to tell a story. Well, in the 70s, that wasn't cool, and at UNLV, that definitely wasn't cool. That wasn't what you were supposed to be doing. So I never quite felt comfortable there. But David Hockney was starting to put text on his paintings. Sweet Carmlath was putting text on her paintings. So I was seeing some of that stuff, and I was trying to sort of imitate that direction with a little text, and I just wanted to be narrative without being illustrated. It just wasn't really happening. So when I went through, being my graduation and all that, still was sort of not fitting into the mainstream. But when I learned about the letterpress printing class at the library with Bob Blessing, I signed up and I learned how to print, and then he started showing me these artist books, and I was totally, this is what I need to do. Because I could incorporate the visual theme, and plus working with all kinds of different materials, which I love, the variety of different materials, and tell my story. So that's where it started. And initially I was doing edition books, multiples editions, all handset type printed. And there was a point where I got really bored with edition work. I printed 50 copies of this one book, and I did I think I put 20 of them together, and I thought, no more, I can't do any more.
Right. Yeah.
And I quit. That's when I started doing assemblage, and I was also, my husband and I were traveling a lot, and I couldn't take all that equipment with me. So I had to start finding portable ways to do things. I still have my narrative stories and books and that. So I started collecting stuff and doing more assemblage. But always trying to have a book element as part of it. Somewhere that'll feel like a book. I didn't show you on the Thel piece, but there's a little.
and your story, I think, right? Because eucatastrophe was, there's a sense of impending doom, right? But there's a happy ending.
Yeah, there's a turnaround.
There's a turnaround.
Leads to a happy ending, yes.
So something, and this probably doesn't have really anything to do with your work, but I find it interesting when I looked up eucatastrophe, was the Stoics are having a moment right now, right? The Stoic philosophers and Seneca. But one of the things about Seneca that I loved was, do you suffer in imagination or do you suffer in memory, right? Do you hold on to your grief and memories, right? Or are you always anxious about the future, type of thing? And when I was looking up this word, right, there was this sense of, do you always think, or is there always a sense of impending doom for you, but yet there's always a happy ending? It was interesting when I was reading this, right, in this work. I just kind of, if there is maybe a philosophical musing that you kind of live by, or that you were, because I've always struggled with suffering in imagination.
Well, I was just going to say I struggle with it because I want to be hopeful, but I'm not always hopeful. you know, and depending on what's happening in the world outside and around me, it's like it is a challenge to hang on to some hope for the future that things will turn around for the better. And also, for me, this piece, this is the sanctuary away from the madness. And that's kind of,
Yes.
and that's kind of similar to leave me alone, I'm reading, you know. This is my space, go away, you know.
Well, yeah, I mean, and I love the way that you have, right, the tones and the grays, right, that you've kind of assembled here. And I also really kind of love the way that you've kind of broken the frame, right, coming out here, just coming out, that little subtlety is really quite lovely.
I can show you too for the camera. The book goes like this. And the you know, the door closes. And so I did this, COVID happened while I was working on this. So I added the quarantine stripe midway through the process. And then I did the magnet thing for the purpose of displaying in the gallery.
Oh, perfect. So we talked a little bit about, off camera, we talked about Joseph Cornell. And he was an influence, right?
Yes, definitely, yeah.
I don't know if you could talk a little bit about Cornell or about...
Well, I just love Cornell. I mean, there was a Cornell exhibit in San Francisco, and I bought 2 tickets because I had to go 2 days in a row to totally absorb it all. But I think I have every book about Cornell there is. And I don't know why, his work instantly spoke to me the first time I ever saw it. And I go back to it a lot to remind myself not to, because most people now, symbology is very popular, and most people put too much in. And it doesn't all have meaning, it shouldn't all be there. I see it as, Cornell's work to me is poetry, it's visual poetry. He knows just what to put in to create an aura in that space. So I go back and look at his work a lot to sort of check myself. It's like, okay, now make sure you're getting the right mood, the right balance, don't overdo it. And I think I was successful here. Even though this is very cluttered, it needed to be because of what it's about, you know.
Right. So, well, this is, I mean, like you said, there's a lot going on here, but it is so well crafted, right? And the composition is so well put together. There's so much going on, and I don't know if you created some of the stuff that's inside.
I made all those books.
You made all those books.
And they're really just little pieces of mat board wrapped in paper and hand colored a little bit, you know, the details on the spines. But that took a long time. I had lots of little tiny work. And there's a little sketchbook on the table.
That's incredible.
There's a
That really
paintbrush,
is. I mean,
and it was like kind of my own little world. You know.
Well, the fact that you opened it up like that and then closed it, and that book recedes inside here, or this paper recedes inside. Would you ever exhibit it closed?
I probably could, but then I don't think people would understand that there's a book there.
Right.
And it's kind of important to me that they understand there's a book, because the books are my thing, you know.
Right.
And there's a book, and it's letterpress printed. I hand set the type and printed one copy.
This feels like a letter.
It's a typecase.
It's a typecase.
Yeah.
This is a typecase.
Yeah.
Wow.
It was a typecase that I don't even remember exactly. Oh, I think I do remember. I think it came from the Fourth Ward School in Virginia City.
Fourth Ward School.
Several years ago,
Wow, that's awesome.
I helped them refurbish the printing press.
Wow.
And set up this little printing studio there. I don't know if it's still there. But this typecase had been left out in the weather, and the back of it was all warped and broken. So I would never use a really good typecase this way because I need typecases, but this one was wrecked, so it was okay.
And this is the definition here of.
Yeah. The text. I like to put the text here so that people can see what the text is, so they don't have to, handle
Correct.
it.
And the quote.
The quote is from Kenneth Rexroth.
And what does it say?
against the ruin of the world, there's only one defense, the creative act, which is what I believe. I mean, that's the hope thing of against what's going on. That's horrible. Artists, poets, need to continue to do the creative act.
So I asked this question to Elaine. So you've been making art for a while, right? You've had a long career of creating. Have you felt content in that pursuit, or is there always that sense of not doom per se, but always something that could subjugate the creative act or you creating?
I feel I have to. I mean, that's all I can do. That's all I've ever been able to do. You know what I mean? It's I decided when I was 6 years old I was going to be an artist and never want to do anything else, and I've never really been able. I've had so many jobs for about 2 weeks. It's
right.
like, no, I can't do this. I have to do art.
Right.
So
you're compelled.
Yes, absolutely.
You're compelled to do this.
But I would say, again, with age, more and more, I just want to do my art, and I don't worry that much about getting it out there or being successful, quote, successful, about making money. I'm getting Social Security now, so I'm not so stressed about the whole money issue.
Right.
And it's freeing, Now more and more I'm able to just, when I have those impulses, just do the piece, whether it's wonderful or not. Whether it takes me 3 or 4 years or not. This took me 2.5 years to finish.
Well, so this is incredible, right? The stuff inside this box. And I don't know how, I mean, there's hundreds of little things in this thing, right? And so I don't know how Sue Cotter's walking around going, yeah, that would work in there. That would work. How you would assemble each one of these, right? Or what would pique your curiosity to say that will work for this piece is interesting to me, right? I don't know if each one of these was like yes, or you just pick something up and say.
Well, some of it was like moving things around. Some of it I definitely knew I wanted to use in there. I started with the windows and doors because I want.
Did you make those?
There is a company that makes miniatures for dioramas for electric trains.
Yep.
And I saw in the catalog I could order a box of like hundreds of doors and windows for $20 or something. So that's where I started. I just started selecting sections to fill. I put the windows, cutting little pieces of wood and framing them and fitting them in. And then, trying to scatter them around. And then I made the brick, I made a mold, polymer clay mold, and made the brick wall pieces. And then I just started going through my stuff, because I just collect stuff. So I started going through and just deciding, okay, this should go there, and just filling in, and looking at it. And
there's just one more formal question, that, right? Because I know myself and how sometimes it can be a little bit anal with aesthetics, or right, really tight sometimes. So when I see things, everything is self-contained in here, but then you've got stuff on top, right? I don't know if I would have had
broken out of the box.
I don't know if I would be able to do that, right? So was this the decision? I know this is kind of geeky, but to kind of want to put stuff up there, was that just an easy decision, just to kind of throw stuff up there, or was?
I think as it evolved, it was, because I felt like, okay, because the entrance to this room is up here, and there's a ladder. There's a ladder.
Right, yes.
So I thought, okay, this is the penthouse, this is the penthouse rooftop patio, But it's also, I do struggle with, because I tend to always have things balanced.
No, because you work very tight.
Yeah,
right? So
and I push myself sometimes, like, okay, break out of the box, quit being so balanced, quit being so controlled,
Right.
So that probably was part of that too,
Right.
to break out of that containment.
Well, that's fantastic. It's a great piece. It really is. And to maintain focus over 2 years to complete a project. That's
It was fun because it was on my work table, and every day I didn't have to think about what to do today. It's there, work on it. And I would just, and I could only work on it for so long because of tiny bits. My eyes would start to get really tired, so I'd have to work in little spurts. Just one reason it took a long time.
so. This you got book here. You got a rock book. You've got this.
And this is actually kind of animated because when you close this, if you look here, okay, watch what happens.
Oh, there is.
So you've got the mourning dove Thel, and then you've got the ravenhead Thel.
Oh my gosh.
The pews.
So there's a corning dove and a raven.
Mourning dove.
Mourning dove.
Because the mask, she has the raven mask over there.
Yeah. So maybe can we just talk about this piece here because I think it's different in the fact that it's all muslin, right? Versus the other thels that have some of the polymer or the clay. And is there a reason why, if this is like an evolution piece?
This is the first one I ever did.
This is the first one.
Yeah.
It's so striking to me because I think at first glance when I first saw it, I just thought you clay like muslin.
Like
right?
muslin.
Yeah, and I was fascinated by that. And I think I might even be more fascinated now that it's just muslin. And your paint on it, it's not a grotesque figure, but it's odd to me, and I don't know how to kind of relate to it. And it's in this dead forest, right? It's gray, it's lacking color, right? It's interesting to me. So maybe you could explain.
Well, I probably,
got this involved.
yeah, the lack of color is probably the whole ethereal other world. She's this spirit being at this point. And so my kind of interpretation of the book of Thel was that she's a spirit being who's wanting to become a material being on earth instead of this ethereal spirit being. And she goes around and she talks to the cloud and the clod of clay and the worm. I don't remember the exact poem, but there's these different creatures or entities she talks to. And they advise her about how it's suffering and pain, and eventually she decides, okay, forget it, I'm not going to go. Well, so in my version, she does come to Earth and becomes this, an earthly being, and continues to go on a journey to find whatever she's looking for. I don't know what she's looking for. But this was the beginning of it, the beginning of the idea, and it was one of those things. I mean, I even know exactly where I was sitting the day that this popped into my mind. And I was sitting in a coffee shop in Cedar City. We had just recently moved to that area. And I have the sketch in my sketchbook, and it's almost exactly what I sketched. And I had the figure, and I went home, and because the material readily at hand for me was muslin, I cut out the shape, I made a pattern, and I cut out the shape, and I painted it and sewed it. And it's hard to see here, but her brains are actually a little piece of topographic map. She had topography on her brain at the time. So I was already working with the topo maps. So I knew I wanted to have that part of the whole story. At the time, a local art gallery at the university was having a photocopy art exhibit. And the Xerox company donated a color Xerox machine to the gallery space for a period of time for students and artists to come in and play with. So I was there every day, free color copies, and I just brought my Thel figure, and I had all these topo map paintings. I had done a show here in Reno years before.
These are paintings.
Yeah, there's paintings on topo maps, and everyone's a little different, painting and drawing. And I had done this show here, and nothing really sold, and I still had the artwork, so I decided to cut it up and use it for my pages. And I used the map pages and backgrounds to put her on the machine with the background, laid some rocks, arranged her in different ways.
That's fantastic.
Yeah. And I just played, and I just did all these different, and I had this vague story. There's the worm that she talks to. Played around with stuff I had. There's another version. There's her with the butterfly.
And this is a painting?
This is a Xerox copy. Just later on the copying machine, put the topo map background. It's this topo map. It's the background.
Right.
Anyway, so I just kind of did all these different images with this vague story in mind. And once there were several I didn't use in the book, but when I got home, I just sorted them out and had a narrative, a loose narrative. Here she's been captured. You know, I had these old gloves and she's captured. And now she's put in a jail or something, some kind of confinement. She's pining. Time's going by and she's sitting on this rock. Well, this is the rock she was sitting on.
Right. Yeah.
So,
I was going to ask you, right? Because there's a lot going on here.
Yeah.
You have the book. And
So
this is the
she
first
discovers
one.
that the rock is open, and when she opens the rock, okay. She opens the rock, and inside, well, so there's pages in the rock.
Yeah.
When she gets to the back page, there's a little door, and there's a key, so she can get out of her jail.
Wow. Wow. So, I mean,
So-
so let me ask you, there's so much, there's so much going on in that. That's, obviously it's not that, there's just so much internally within this, right? That's in this, now all of that, what we just talked about, is now going back and it's right here. So, I guess it's not that important for the viewer to know that.
No, because I feel like they can make up their own story. I mean, I made up a story when I made all these images, I didn't really have the story in mind yet, but I just played with the stuff. And then when I got home, I started laying it out, thinking, okay, there's a storyline here. And then I did go back and do some images to fit the storyline.
Right.
But I'm happy
think-
to have the viewer have their own.
Exactly, and I think, look, so the book, right, is referential to kind of what's going on here, which is really quite lovely.
It's a great topographic paper on the cover. When I found that in the art store, I was like, oh my gosh, that's perfect.
It is an interesting, it's visually, I don't know why it piqued my curiosity. And I think, first of all, it was probably mistaking it for clay at the very beginning, and then realizing the muslin aspect of it, and it was just...
Oh, and I should show you too. So this goes. So the whole box closes up. You know, the drawer closes, this closes, and it's just the box.
That's fantastic.
So there's all these, I always like the idea of things to explore, challenging the viewer to explore.
Yeah.
The problem is that in galleries you can't really, you're not supposed to touch stuff, so, you know, that part gets lost.
Let me just ask you, so maybe I'll ask you, what do you have coming up in the near future? Are you staying in town, or do you have exhibits? Are you traveling?
We're heading home tomorrow, and we got so much going on.
Are you showing? Are you kind of?
No, I've got a teaching commitment in Salt Lake Marriott Library. I'm going to teach an assemblage workshop. But a couple of years ago, I found that I was spending so much time teaching and doing shows that I wasn't getting new artwork done. So I was running out of new work to show and spending all my time and energy teaching.
Right.
So I was starting to get my Social Security and didn't feel that much pressure anymore. I decided I'm just going to quit the teaching and the showing and just do what I feel like doing. My own art, whatever I feel like doing. And then, of course, this opportunity came up and I could not say no because I haven't shown in this area in a really long time. And this is where I started, basically, as far as the letterpress printing and the book making.
Well, it's fantastic. It's a fantastic show, and congratulations. Thanks you for talking to me. I appreciate it.
Thank you all. This has been an amazing conversation. I can't wait for everybody to watch it. We are missing one artist. Chris Lanier wrote the essay. You can come, pick it up in the gallery. That's where you should get it. Or you can watch it, read it online. It is archived online. So we are missing one artist. But I've known Sue since we were undergrads at UNR. in the last century. And Elaine I've gotten to know recently, and I'm very impressed with both their work. And Stefan, you did an amazing job with the interview. Thank you. So I hope everybody will come watch. Nevada Neighbors is now online, and so you can, and it will be posted on YouTube, so there's no excuse. You get to watch. So thank you all so much.
Thank you, Sharon, for having
Thanks for
me
having
here.
us, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it's good. It's a good thing. So thank you to the college for the space, and as I said, to Kristen there for writing the essay, and to our funders. And we have 3 other galleries in Carson City, all with plenty of free parking. And we are on Instagram and Facebook, and the funders will be on the following slide, and I think that's it. So thank you all.